Salawat. Okay. शुरू से पहले मेरे पास एक ख्वाहिश है और मेरी ख्वाहिश ये है कि जब हमारे बच्चे कुरान और मरसिए और दुआ हर चीज़ पढ़ रहे हैं दूसरे लोग बात मत करें क्योंकि बच्चे हमारे आइंदे हैं और ज़रूरी है कि हमारे बच्चे तशवीक करें इंकरेज करें कि पढ़ रहे हैं। अगर कुरान पढ़ने के मायने और मरसी पढ़ने के मायने दूसरे लोग बात कर रहे हैं इंकरेजमेंट नहीं है। तो ये मेरे ख्वाहिश है इंशाअल्लाह। सलावत। अल-फातिहा। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي جعل الحمد مفتاحا لذكره وسببا للمزيد من فضله ودليلا على آلائه وعظمته ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدي ومولاي سيد المرسلين وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك وعلى جدك وأبيك صلى الله عليك وعلى أمك وأخيك صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميع شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. والسلام أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله قل يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جاءتكم جنود فأرسلنا عليهم ريحا وجنودا لم تروها وكان الله بما تعملون بصيرا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Our discussion is on Surah Al-Ahzab, and particularly starting from verse 9 of Surah Al-Ahzab, wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He calls upon the believers to remember His blessing upon you. And particularly the blessing in which an army had approached you, had approached the Prophet and the believers. A large army made up of the mushrikeen of Mecca, the polytheists of Mecca, and some of the munafiqeen that were in Medina, the hypocrites in Medina, and also some of the Jewish tribes, that they were plotting against the Prophet. And this was the Battle of Khandaq, or Battle of Ahzab. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, remember this blessing, that they came forth and approached you. But we sent upon them a wind and an army that was unseen. And surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is seeing all that you do. Yesterday we mentioned that as Surah Al-Ahzab and Surah Al-Munafiqun, one of the reasons for reading these, as it is mentioned by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afsalatu wasalam, the Prophet and our Ummah, they say that read these so that one, you can keep yourself away from hypocrisy, that you will not fall into hypocrisy. And two, in order to protect yourself, to protect your family, and to protect the community from the hypocrites. One of those things that we mentioned that will help the Ummah to protect itself from the hypocrites and those who are antagonistic against Islam is to have a jama'ah, to have unity. And that unity is fortified through the salat al-jama'ah, through our prayers. And by having such unity, a community of faith, then we help to protect one another. And not only do we help to protect one another, then we make ourselves, as a ummah, as a jama'ah, the recipients of divine help. The recipients of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings and the answering of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of our du'as. As the Prophet did in the battle of Khandaq, which we were speaking about, as the Prophet he did, and the believers, they called upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the battle of Badr when they were outnumbered 10-1. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sent angels to help. Likewise, if we are an ummah of faith, an ummah that believes in justice and in righteousness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will answer our dua. And I don't think that we are not short of having du'as to recite. In fact, today in the Jum'ah, and I think after every salat, it seems that there's a du'a that we all recite, and that is for the faraj of Imam Zaman, Ajjal al-Faraj al-Sharif. And inshallah, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He answers this du'a. Because truly, if we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this du'a, for the hastened reappearance of Imam Zaman, then Allah, He will answer. But one of the conditions and criteria of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answering your dua is iman. Having faith. And having strong faith. And not doubting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. Not having any doubt in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. Sometimes we make dua, but then we become doubtful, or we think, well, it didn't answer, my dua wasn't answered this very second that I have asked. It wasn't answered after 2 days. And sometimes we begin to doubt. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, call upon Him and have no doubt. And in fact, this is what the second, or actually verse 10 of Surah Al-Ahzab is about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, and to some extent it is fortifying the first part of the first ayat that we recited, which is verse 9. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that, yes, these armies came, but we helped you. We helped you. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرًا. And Allah was watching. Actually, even before the help came, Allah was watching to see that how would the believers act? Or at least those who claimed that they were believers, what would they do? what would they do? And this comes very clear in verse 10, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِذْ جَاءُكُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ إِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. SubhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's painting this picture for us, that what was happening at the time of the Battle of Khandaq. Not only who was coming, but even what were the reactions of those individuals who were with Rasulullah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِذْ جَاءَكُمْ, meaning when the army, it came. مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ, from above you, meaning from above the valley. وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ, and from below the valley. Meaning in every direction, the enemies are coming. Basically, what He's saying, that the enemy, they made a very strategic plan. They didn't come without a plan and just, okay, well, we're going to just come anyway. No, they were very strategic. Because they came, مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلِ مِنْكُمْ, from every direction. And by coming from every direction, it would not allow you to go forward, to go backward, to go anywhere. You were trapped in that one place. And this is the same thing that we see in Karbala. The exact same thing. Hur, he was commissioned to stop Imam Husain in Karbala, not allowing him to advance to Kufa. But then also there was an army that was sent, there were men that were sent behind Imam Husain that wouldn't let him even to return to Medina or to go to any other direction. This is the same thing that happened in the Battle of Khandaq. That they were coming from every direction. And once the Prophet and believers, they knew that they're going to be coming from every direction, at that point, this is when the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he began to speak to the companions and say that, what would you do in this situation? There were different ideas that were given. Salman al-Farisi, he's the one who said that, well, what we would do is that we will build a ditch. And by building this ditch, we will cut off the city. And so therefore, we are maintaining control. Because anyone who wants to fight, they would have to come across that ditch. And when they come across, then we will be prepared for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed to Rasulullah that this is the best idea. Go with this idea. But He cut off the city, dug the ditch around the city. On one hand, by doing so, that they would take the upper ground. Although, yes, they weren't up, but they would take the upper ground, meaning that they would have more control of those who are coming from the outside. Secondly, those who were munafiqeen, those who were hypocrites and who were in Medina, who were still in Medina at the time, even after the ditch was dug, they would still have control. Because those individuals cannot easily even get out of Medina to go and to join forces. In fact, even Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that he was guarding at night, that before the battle even started, that he would stay up basically the whole night, guarding, walking around Medina to ensure that no one is trying to even get out. So that the hypocrites would not reveal their plans before the army came to fight them. Because when they came, then they saw, oh, there's a ditch. At that point, they had no choice but now to figure out, what are we going to do at this point? But they did not allow anyone to leave in order to mention it. We dug a ditch. So again, the believers must be very aware. They must also have a strategy, have a plan. Nonetheless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in verse 10, He explains the state of many of the people when they saw the Ahzab, when they saw the different parties the non-believers, coming forth to fight the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ, meaning that they stared in awe and in fear. Some of them. This is not all, and we'll explain. But many, they stared in fear. They saw the masses. That how many enemies, how many people came out just to fight the believers. Just to bring down the flag, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So some stared in awe that, how are we going to, we're a small in number. How is it that we're going to defeat such enemies, such a large army? وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ, and their hearts, it came up to their throat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's explaining the signs of fear. That if someone is afraid of something, quite often they are frozen in fear. And a person who's frozen in fear, he just looks at that thing that he's afraid of, can't move. Not only can he not move and he's staring at that thing, but also it becomes difficult for that individual to breathe. That it's as if his heart has come up to his throat and it's making it difficult for him to breathe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that when this army came, He says, many of you, although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He promised His help, He says, many of you stared in fear, froze in fear, and your hearts were at your throats. You could not even hardly breathe. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and a third thing, their characteristic, He says, وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظَّنُونَ. And they thought all kinds of things about Allah. Said, Ya Allah, we said La ilaha illallah, we followed your prophet. But now this calamity of so many people against us, Ya Allah, we decided to walk the path of truth, of righteousness. But even on this path, we have so many who are against us that the weapons we have, what we have, is nothing compared to what they have. So what type of faith is this, Allah? They begin to have these doubts. They begin to think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to help them. Even if we transfer this to today, some people, they look at all of the calamities and the tragedies that the Muslims are in today, and they say, oh, we keep making dua. Allahumma kulli waliyika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala aba'i fi hadhihi as-sa'a wa fi kulli sa'a waliyan wa hafidha wa qa'idan wa nasira wa dalilan wa ayna. Ya Allah, send Imam al-Hujjah to us. Send the Imam to us. Change the situation of this world that has become so filled with corruption. Where's Imam al-Hujjah? And then we see the reaction. Look at the reaction. Some will begin to doubt. Some people's heart will begin to swerve. Some will begin to think, oh, he's not going to come. Is this a reality or not? Some will become so afraid. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that He's watching. He's seeing. And one of the conditions, as we mentioned already, one of the conditions for this dua to be answered, and any dua to be answered, is Iman. So if we say that we're mu'min, or that we are believers, what does it mean that we're believers? And someone who has belief, does such fear penetrates his heart? Yes or no? This is a question. And of course, our example of Iman is Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Husain, all of our Imam alayhim salatu wasalam. And then if we say that, yeah, they're ma'soom. Okay, fine. But look at the companions of the Prophet. Look at Salman Farsi. Look at Jafar al-Tayyar, Abu Dhar al-Ghafari. Look at the companions of Imam Husain. Okay, they're not ma'soom, but they followed the ma'soom. And they became examples of what the believer should be. So there's no excuse that, these guys are ma'soom and we're not. Well, subhanAllah. Their companions were not ma'soom in that sense that from birth to them. But when they followed the ma'soom, then they imitated and they adopted the characteristics of the ma'soom. And this is what Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, he states. He says, Asbaha shi'atuna ma'suman bina. He says, our Shia, those who truly follow us, who walk in our footsteps, who make their lives like our lives, he says, they become ma'soom by virtue of us. Meaning that they abstain from sin. They make their salat. They make their salat as it should be. They do their fast as it should be. But they're doing it just as the Ahlul Bayt did it, as the Prophet did. As Imam Hassan, as Imam Husain, as Fatima Zahra. They are the example of Iman. And so we see that as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the address from verse 9 is to the believers, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu udhkuru ni'matallah. Remember that blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He talks about the army coming, and he says, إِذْ جَاءُكُمْ. So he's still talking to the believers. That you who believe, or at least you claim that you have faith, some of you, your iman was shaken when the army came. When the difficulties came, your iman was shaken. So we have, yes, iman that is strong and iman that is weak. And it is our responsibility to strengthen our iman so that when our test comes, that we are not weak. That we do not turn back on our heels, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks in the Quran, that some turn back on their heels. We must strengthen our iman. And in fact, Imam Sadiq says, iman is on 10 levels. And there are 10 degrees of iman. Then he gives an example. He says, and Miqdad, he's on the 8th level of iman. Abu Dhar is on the 9th level of iman. Salman Farsi is on the 10th level of iman. And we can have a discussion simply about that. What are these different levels of iman? But that would take another 10 sessions or a month just to go into the details of that. And we don't have that time right now. But one thing, if someone would like to understand it, I would say, just on a minute scale, look at the hadith that these individuals, they narrated from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasallam, and that would give you some understanding of why their imans were on different levels. Miqdad, a lot of hadith about akhlaq, about ethics, about doing things, about the way you should pray, these things. Abu Dhar, a lot of hadith about, again, ethics, about truthfulness. And of course, he was exiled from Medina because of his truthfulness. That after the shahadat of Rasulullah, he kept saying, no, Ali is the right one. Ali is the right one. Oh, some people got tired. Oh, we can't have him going around saying this. They couldn't kill him because they knew that, if we kill this guy, then everybody knows that we are exposed. Because there's no doubt that he was one of the closest companions to Rasulullah. So we can't kill him, so exile him. Get rid of him. Salman Farsi, when you read his hadith, a lot of them are very esoteric. He's talking about the unseen, that, oh, he was with the Prophet and this happened, and we saw the unseen, or he was with Ali and then the veils of the unseen were lifted. So we see the different darajat, the different levels of Iman. But nonetheless, the point is that Iman has strengths and weaknesses, and we must strengthen our Iman. How do we do this? And how do we keep our hearts firm upon the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That if we faced what Imam Husain faced, and imagine this, and subhanAllah, that the day of Ashura, and Imam Husain, he stated, he says, it is certain death. We're surrounded. We cannot go forward. We cannot go backwards. We have no water. They won't let us go. So how do you feel of going into certain death, making that sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then we hear statements, al-maut ahla min al-asal. That death is sweeter than honey. You hear statements like this. This is an individual at the peak of Iman. At the peak of Iman. So how do we reach that? And what exactly is Iman? First of all, there's no Iman or true faith without Islam. If one has Islam, and Islam, I must make the disclaimer. Because sometimes we think, oh, well, Islam is to do this or to do that. Islam is to wear this type of clothes and not that type of clothes. Islam is to have a topi on my head or not have a topi. No, Islam is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. Islam is submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Imam Sadiq, he explained, there's no Islam, there's no Iman without Islam. But there's Islam without Iman. A person can be Muslim, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, but not have Iman. But that individual who is mu'min, he must have Islam. And when Imam Sadiq, he was asked that, what is the difference between Islam? Is there a difference, and what is this difference between Islam and Iman? He was asked 3 times before he actually gave the answer to this individual. Then finally he says, you really want to know. So now I'll tell you. He says, Al-Islam huwa dhahiru ma alayhi an-nas. It is the apparent thing which people do. Their actions. And then he specifies this. He says, min shahadati an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. By professing this creed, a person becomes Muslim. وَمِن صَلَاةٍ وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ. By establishing the salat, a person becomes Muslim. وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ. And by giving the zakat, a person is Muslim. وَحَجِّ الْبَيْتِ. And by going to Hajj, of course with all of the rules, then a person is Muslim. وَصِيَامِ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ. It says, فَهَذَا هُوَ الْإِسْلَامِ. And remember, there is no Iman without Islam, without the Shahada, without the fasting, without the Salah. And we mentioned last night the importance of Salah, that we organize our life, if we can, and to the best of our ability, we organize our life around the Salat, not our Salat around our lives. That's what the believer does. That's what the mu'min does. Hajj and fasting. Then Imam, he says, Wal Iman, He says, ma'rifatu hadha al-amr. Ma'a hadha. Very beautiful the way the Imam he puts it. He says, wal iman, and believe, true belief, ma'rifatu hadha al-amr. Meaning with the walayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afsalatu wasalam. Having ma'rifat of the walayat of Ahlul Bayt, along with those actions of Islam. The Imam, he didn't say to know وَيَعْلَمْ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ or إِلْمِ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ. He says مَعْرِفَةَ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ. And ma'rifah is profound understanding of the Ahlul Bayt and the walayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afsalatu wasalam. One who has this ma'rifat of Ahlul Bayt would never separate the Imams from Islam, or would say something that is contradictory to the actions of the Imam. And we mentioned that Imam Husain alayhi in every action going to Karbala, everything was surrounded by the worship and the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he's leaving from Medina, li-islahi ummati jaddi, as he stated, in order to correct the ills of the ummah of my grandfather, how is it that he will be neglectful of any type of ibadah? When he felt that, oh, there's danger in Medina, Ya Abbas, let's go, grab the family, let's go. Where did he go? Went to Hajj. He went to make Hajj. A place, Mecca, where it is even forbidden, or it is highly makruh to make a scratch. To scratch yourself. Why is it makruh to scratch yourself? Because in the haram of Mecca, it is absolutely forbidden to kill any creature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if that creature is a lice that is upon your skin, upon your hair, that is feeding from you, that you can't see it. It's microscopic. You can't see it. So out of the possibility that you may kill it by scratching, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through this prophet, says, don't scratch while you're in Hajj. You may kill something. And it is haram to kill anything in the haram of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything has safety. And this is why, subhanAllah, unfortunately, we don't observe these rules. And this is why even according to fiqh, it's actually makruh to live in that area where the haram is. He says, don't live there. Why? Because every day we're scratching or we're doing something, we may step on something, we may kill something. So in order to sanctify this place, is recommended, yes, if you want to live close, fine, live close, but live on the outskirts of those boundaries where it is okay, well, not saying okay, but where it is not forbidden to kill anything. And unfortunately, mashallah, Mecca, so we live around it. But every day, we may scratch our hair, we may do something that kills something. So Imam Husain, from the time of leaving Medina is dangerous. Let's go to a place that there's safety. And that is the Haram of Allah in Mecca. But subhanAllah, look at the thoughts of the enemy. That even in Mecca, he was not safe. That he learned of a plot to kill him. Even in Mecca. Although it's haram to kill a lice. That they're going to kill the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he left from there, headed towards Kufa after the letters. Along the way, he meets Hur. When he meets Hur, it's a time for prayer, time for dhuhr. He establishes a prayer. Hur and his army, they are led in prayer by Imam Husain. Every point in this journey of Karbala, Imam Husain alayhi wasallam, he's engaged in ibadah. Because this ibadah is a thing which increases your iman. This ibadah makes your iman so strong that even in a situation like Karbala, that you have no fear. In a situation of Badr, in a situation of Khandaq, you have no fear. Your faith is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us several indications of this in the Quran. That it is this ibadah that strengthens the heart. That when such individuals, بَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ, that when those who iman is not strong, in the face of such difficulties, their heart rises to their throat. And here, heart has many different meanings in Arabic. But here we can think of that it means soul, the ruh. The soul, as if the soul is about to come out of the body. Because actually, when the person is also dying, what happens? A lot of times he has difficulty breathing. His soul is coming out. So you see this and you, oh my God, you're about to die. Out of fear. Out of fear, not fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but fear of something else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He tells us to cultivate our hearts. And to cultivate our heart with His remembrance. And when we cultivate our hearts with His remembrance, it strengthens our iman. And our hearts will not quiver at those sights. Where does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say this? And how does He say it? How eloquently does He say it? And what is the thing that He gives us in order to cultivate our heart? It's salah. Prayer. He says, Aqim as-salat li dhikri. Establish the prayer in order to remember me. If you want to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best way to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in your salah. Unfortunately, most of us, we use the salat as the best way of remembering something that we forgot. Because when we start Allahu Akbar, then everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to mind. Oh, I have this appointment. Allahu Akbar. Oh, I lost my keys. Oh, now I just remember where it was. I'm in ruku. Subhanallah, subhanallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, forget these things. Remember me in the salat. That is one of the reasons why we face the Qibla. And again, this comes from the ma'rifah of Ahlul Bayt and understanding the Ahlul Bayt and what they're teaching us. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not in one direction. Allah is not sitting in the east, so therefore we have to face east or northeast. أَيْنَمَا تَوَجُّ فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. That in any direction, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. But we face the east or we face one direction as a regiment. And as Imam Sadiq, he states, he says, you face a qibla because at that moment that you begin salat, that you're making a symbolic turn away from the dunya. You turn away from everything and you turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You turn your mind towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not towards those keys that you lost, not towards that meeting that you had. No, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Forget everything behind you. The dunya should be behind you. And nothing but the thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be before you. So, aqim as-salat li dhikri. Turn away from everything, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again coupling this verse that establishes salat in order to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, coupling it with another verse when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states, Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innal qulub. Is it not by the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that their hearts become content, that their hearts become firm and steady? The believers, they use their salat in order to make their hearts firm and steady. That in the face of any calamity, they're not afraid. In the face of any calamity, Their trust is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how is it that we take the salat so lightly? How is it that we arrange the salat around our life rather than arranging our life around our salat? Until we learn to arrange our life around our salat, yes, we are going to be in that state that we are at times, becoming fearful. If I stand up for my rights have been taken from me. If I stand up for my rights, this person is going to say this. I'm going to get arrested. Or this is going to happen. That's going to. The believer says, no. This is truth. This is justice. This is an application, how our imams would do. So it's time for me to stand up for truth. It's time for me to stand up for justice. Of course, bil hikmah, with wisdom, and in the best way. Standing up for justice doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to go and knock this building down, or I'm going to do something that is contrary to justice itself. No, but to stand up for what is right. To have if you need so, have every single piece of documentation, 1, 2, 3, that this is right, what I'm saying, and what's happening is wrong. But sometimes we get so, if I say that, you know what, I'm going to lose this, and I'm not going to have this anymore. Someone's going to do this to me. Someone's going to say that to me. SubhanAllah. Imam Husain, alayhi salatu he says, he told his companions that the thing that is going to be taken away from you tomorrow on Ashura is perhaps the most precious thing, something that you may think is the most precious thing, and that is your life. That is your life. After today, there is no life in this dunya. And I said, fine. If this is what we have to do at this moment to correct that which is wrong, then we will do it. If this is what we have to do to ensure that the salat continues, then we will do it. Because Yazid, he didn't make salat. This is something that's established in the history books, not by Shia historians, no. By Sunni historians. Tabarasi, go look, he didn't make salat. He didn't encourage fasting, nor did he make fasting. But today we say, we take the salat lightly. SubhanAllah. But we read in the ziyarat of Imam Husain, ziyarat of Ashhadu annaka aqamta as-salat wa atayta az-zakat wa amarta bil ma'ruf wa nahayta 'anil munkar. That we bear witness, Imam Husain, that you established the salat. You kept the salat established. You gave the zakat, and you enjoin good and you forbid the wrong. So at no moment should we take our salat lightly. And when we make our salat, when we establish our salat, turn away from the dunya. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this will help you when the times become difficult. This will place in your heart the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the fear of man, not the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. As Imam Sadiq, he says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He says, Man akhaf Allah, akhaf Allahu minhu kull shay. That whosoever fears Allah, has the fear of Allah in his heart, then everything will fear him. And meaning everything will humble itself before that servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that fears nothing but Allah. That person who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the face of the most difficult situation, his soul, his qalb does not come to his throat. That I can't breathe. Or they don't become frozen in fear. Because they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on their side. Even if they have to give their life at that moment, if that is the thing that Allah wants, they give it. They don't have that fear. But وَمَنْ لَمْ يَخْفِ اللَّهِ, as Imam he continues, whoever does not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَخَافَ اللَّهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, then Allah will make that person fear everything. Meaning that he will fear everything because he doesn't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But really, what is this fear of Allah? How do we comprehend this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because I don't want to just leave it like that. Oh, so we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh, Allah, He's scary. Is it that type of fear? That Allah's a scary being, so I should be afraid of Him. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not scary. He's Arhamur Rahimeen. He's the most merciful and merciful. But this fear that the Muslim who may have become mu'min and the mu'min who intends to strengthen his iman, that fear that one should have is the fear to sever his or her ties with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That if by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I'm able to, if I've been placed in a situation, even if that situation came after hijrah, I know some people who made hijrah, they couldn't even pray back home. So they came here and they are free to pray. Or by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are put in a position where you can perform your ibadah. That one should fear that I am taken away from this through my sins, that I go back to that state that I can't pray. Or I go back to that state where I am neglectful. Although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's opened the door for you. That look, subhanAllah, go and pray. Build a Shia masjid without any fear of someone coming to murder people inside the masjid, destroying it, bulldozering it. This is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make use of that blessing. The fear is that there will come a time when this blessing is taken away from you. Why? Because I didn't use that blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he says it very beautifully. He says, Al-Mu'min, and these are the qualities of a believer. He says, Al-Mu'min bayna makhafatain. He says the believer, and of course this is what strengthens the heart of a believer. He says he lives between two fears. He says, ذنبًا قد مضى لا يدري ما صنع الله فيه. He says the first fear is a sin that person committed. And he is not sure how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has dealt with that sin. Has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiven me for it or not? He says, the believer and that one who seeks to strengthen his iman, that's his first fear. That, oh, I did this. I did something that displeased Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiven me for that or not? Even I make my istighfar 70 times a day, or I do the other dua. But really, we do not have access to that knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He says, yes, I've forgiven you for this. So have I done something that Allah hasn't forgiven me for? Or I've done something and I forgot to even ask forgiveness for it. That's the first fear. The second fear, Imam Sadiq, he says, وَعُمْرُ قَدْ بَقِيَ لَا يَدْرِي مَا يَكْسِبُ فِيهِ مِنَ الْمَحَالِكِ. And between his life, the rest of the life that he has from this point to the end of his life. That he fears that there may be something he may do that perhaps it may destroy his a'mal. So therefore, he fears to fall into that situation whereby his actions are destroyed, whereby his iman is destroyed, whereby it takes him off of the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَا يُصْبِحُ إِلَّا خَائِفًا. He says, so every time the believer wakes, he is in a state of fear. That have I done something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't forgiven me for? Or is there something before me, some pitfall that I need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we do, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. One of the du'as of protection that we can recite every time we leave our house is Ayatul Kursi. Recite it to leave your home. Or recite even salawat and leave your home. This is also a dua of protection. So is there some sort of pitfall before me today, tomorrow, in a week, in a year, 10 years, that I am prone to fall into? That I have not yet corrected my nafs to the point that I am not prone to that mistake, that flaw. So is there something that I may fall into that will destroy me? So the believer, he wakes up khaifan, afraid that whatever blessing he has now may leave him because of his own mistakes. وَلَا يُصْلِحُهُ إِلَّا الْخَوْفِ. Then Imam Sadiq, he says, and this fear and this state, he says, this is what corrects him. وَلَا يُصْلِحُهُ إِلَّا الْخَوْفِ. In other words, it is this thinking, this approach that corrects the believer, that increases his iman. That he fears to fall in a state, and again, like the munafiqun. If you look at the munafiqun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Munafiqun, which those who are here for Jummah, they heard, and it's recommended to recite every Friday. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them and their actions of hypocrisy. He says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا ثُمَّ كَفَرُوا. Is that their actions of hypocrisy is because they believed at one point, they came into the folds of belief, even if it's at the lowest level of Islam. They came into this fold. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا ثُمَّ كَفَرُوا. And after coming into the folds of belief, for some reason, some doubt, and this is why the Rasulullah is there. They could have that doubt answered. But after belief, they disbelieve. فَتُبِعَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ. And then their hearts were sealed. It was sealed by their own actions, by their own disbelief, by their own sinning. So much to the point that their sins led them to arrogance. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Munafiqun, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا يَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَوْبُوا رَؤُوسَهُمْ وَرَأَيْتَهُمْ يَصُدُّونَ. That even to the point that if you call them to Rasulullah, and the Prophet of Allah will ask forgiveness for them, what were their actions? They turned away in arrogance. And they made a barrier between themselves and the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That to this point, after having some iman, some belief, they turned away in arrogance. To the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the most merciful of the mercy, the most merciful of beings, He said, He tells the Prophet of Allah, وَإِن تَسْتَغْفِرُ لَهُمْ وَإِن أَسْتَغْفَرْتَ لَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تَسْتَغْفِرُ لَهُمْ لَنْ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ. That, Ya Rasulullah, at this point that they have indulged in sin and they did not come back, and they turn away in arrogance. He says, at this point now, whether you ask forgiveness for them or you do not ask forgiveness for them, I will never forgive them. Subhanallah. Imagine this. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the creator of everything. Imagine, just think of it. And especially mothers and parents. That how merciful is a mother to her child. A lot of times children do very bad things. Break the mother's favorite vase. They do this, they do that. But yet, a mother especially, and parents, they have mercy. They say, okay, well, you know what? Let's move beyond this. We can get over this. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is even more merciful than that. But yet, He says His creation can reach a point to where He will no longer forgive them. SubhanAllah. And one of those points is if the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves from the heart. And when the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves from the heart, and in the face of such calamities, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He explains here in Surah Al-Ahzab, in the Battle of Khandaq, that some people, they said, oh, we want to go back to our homes. We want to leave. That, Ya Rasulullah, everyone is against us. Everyone is against us. Of course, everyone, but the most important person, the most important being, that was Allah. Allah is not against you. Allah is with you. Strengthen your iman. But they said, oh, everyone is against us. Let us go back to our homes. They began to doubt in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll get to the point of what the believer said, those who iman is strong, in verse 22 of Surah Al-Ahzab. When they saw the Ahzab, when they saw the masses, what they said? They said, هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَ اللَّهُ. This is what Allah has promised us. وَازْدَادَ إِيمَانًا وَتِسْلِيمًا. SubhanAllah, after seeing the masses, all of these individuals against Him, they said, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us. Not only did they say that, they said, their iman increased and their submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increased. SubhanAllah. Meaning, in the face of such calamities, those who had strong iman, the iman did not get weaker. The iman actually got stronger. Their iman got stronger from seeing that. And trust me, this is a lesson for us. Karbala is a lesson for us. That when, on the night of the 9th, when the enemies, they began to attack, the believers, they were engaged in ibadah. What were they engaged in? Salah, dua, reciting the Quran. In the face of certain death, they were increasing their iman and their submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says about the believers in the Battle of Khandaq. He says, they saw the large army. He says, but they said, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us. Their iman increased and their submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increased. We make dua for Imam al-Zaman, Ajjal al-Farij Sharif. But when what comes at the end of time, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has promised, and through His prophets, of the difficulties, and particularly the difficulties who believe La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, Aliyun Waliyullah. What happens to our iman? We see it. We know it. Actually, even the world is coming to know it when you turn on the television. That many people, they can successfully ask for their rights, but if you believe La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, Aliyun Waliyullah, if you stand up to ask for your rights, you're crushed and no one says anything about it. هذا ما وعد الله. But what is the state of our iman? Allah has promised us. Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, and this will be the last hadith. But Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, about the time, at the end of time, he says, لا بد أن يكون قدام القائم عجل الفرج الشريف سنة يجوع فيها الناس ويصيبهم خوف من شديد القتل. The Imam says, it will happen. And he's saying this with ta'keed, with certainty. It will happen before the rise of the Qa'im, Ali Muhammad, before the rise of Imam Zaman. He said, there will be a year, and in this year, there will be hunger. People will face hunger. People will face khawfun shadid min al-qatl. And they will face a great fear from death. Look around the world. Look at the individuals who are even standing up for basic rights, and they're just being killed just for asking for their basic rights so they can survive, and some of them so they can even eat properly. Some will not even speak up because of fear of death. Imam Sadiq says, near the end of time, this will happen for sure. But the question is, where's our iman? Where does our iman stand? Is it firm that we will fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will stand up for justice and righteousness, or will we quiver and will we shake? Will we stand firm like the companions of Imam Husain? Will we answer that call of Husain? Will we answer the call of our Imam al-Hujjah, when he comes and he's looking for his companions who will stand with him, the 313? Will we answer that call? Even if we know that by answering we are walking into certain death for our Imam, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will we answer? So that the Imam can establish the salat? So that the Imam can establish justice? Will we answer? Will we be like Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi on the night of Tasu'ah? Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, he was one of those few companions who was with Hani ibn Urwa in Kufa, who wrote a letter to Imam Husain to come to Kufa and we will stand with you. He was one of those few individuals that made their way out of Kufa to stand with Imam Husain. That he promised the Imam something and he stuck by his promise. When we say, Imam, hasten, we're calling him that we will stand with him. Do we stand by this promise of our Imam? When he comes, when he calls upon us? Sa'id ibn Abdullah, on the night, the eve of Ashura, when Imam Husain, he dimmed the lights and he told his companions that if you want to go, then you leave. And I would not hold it against you. Because tomorrow is certain death. Know that no man who can bear a sword will leave alive tomorrow. Sa'id ibn Abdullah, he was one of those individuals who responded. And his response to Imam Husain was this: La wallah, No, I swear by Allah, لا والله لا نخليك حتى يعلم الله أن قد حفظنا غيبة رسول الله وذريته. This is Imam Husain. I swear by Allah, I will never leave. I will not leave by your side until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows. Subhanallah. He wants only Allah to know, that Allah should know that I have protected you, that I have done my best to stand before you and to protect you, Ya Mawla. I swear by Allah, if I was martyred, if I was killed, Wallahi law qatiltu thumma ub'itha hayya, that I swear by Allah that if I was killed and I was brought back to life, thumma uhriqa wa yuf'alu bi dhalika 70 مرة ما تركتك وحدك يا أبا Abdullah. He says, if I was killed and I was brought back to life, and if my body was burned 70 times, that, oh Abba Abdullah, I would never leave you alone. He said he would never leave Imam Husain alone on the plains of Karbala, that if this happened. And when the battle began, Sa'id ibn Abdullah, what did he do on the battlefield of Karbala? It was a time of Dhuhr. And when Imam Husain, he called Ali Akbar forth to call the adhan for the Dhuhr. Allahu Akbar. Ali Akbar, he called the adhan, but the fighting did not stop. So Sa'id ibn Abdullah, he said, Ya Husain, Ya Mawlai, I will stand in front of you so that you may make the salat. So Sa'id ibn Abdullah, he stood before Imam Husain. وَكُلَّمَا تَحَرَّكَ الْحُسَيْن تَحَرَّكَ Sa'id ibn Abdullah. That every time that Imam Husain, he moved for the salat, standing, sitting, then Sa'id ibn Abdullah, he also moved in order to protect the Imam, to shield the Imam. It is said that after the salat, that Sa'id ibn Abdullah, he fell to the ground and he had 13 arrows in him. In addition to 13 arrows, his body was cut and maimed by swords and by maces. That there were spears also in the legs of Sa'id ibn Abdullah. There were spears in his body. And according to one riwayah, it is said that when he fell to the ground, he looked up at Imam Husain and he asked Imam Husain one thing. He says, Ya Mawlai, oh my master, hal adayt, did I fulfill my promise? Because I promised to protect you. I promised to shield you. Did I fulfill this promise? Na'am ya Sa'id, that yes, he fulfilled this promise. He fulfilled this promise to protect Imam Husain. He fulfilled this promise to shield Imam Husain. But that was only for a moment. That was only until Imam Husain, he had companions and he had a family. But once the family and the companions of Imam Husain were martyred, Imam Husain had no one to shield him. Imam Husain had no one to come to his aid. That every shaheed that fell to the battlefield of Karbala, that as they were falling to the battlefield of Karbala, they all called out to Imam Husain. They called to someone that would come and run to their aid. They would call out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdillah. But Imam Husain, in the end, when he stood alone, as Sa'id said, I will never leave you alone as long as he is alive. But when Imam Husain, he stood alone, he knew that there was no one that he could call to. So Imam Husain, when he was falling to the plains of Karbala, he could not call upon anyone. He could not call upon Sa'id. He could not call upon Ali Akbar. He could not call upon Abbas. So he just called out, Bismillah wa billah, hada qatilun fi sabilillah. That in the name of Allah, this is the martyr in the way of Allah. Ala la'natullahi ala qawmi al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم بحق هذه اللهم بحق هذه المجلس الحسينية اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا وقضي حوائجنا واشفي مرضانا وارحم أمواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه وتحت لوائه بحق محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. ماتم حسين.